One day, while traveling south of the combat zone, we see a large Art Deco sign towering above us, clinging to the side of an ancient building. This is Warren Theater, and it's a fascinating find because the Warren Theater in our universe was demolished in 1836. The original Warren Theater was built by William Pelby and opened on July 3, 1832. The Warren Theater was built on the site of the previous American Amphitheater in the Theater District on the corner of Traverse Street and Portland Street, which had hosted equestrian performances. But the Warren Theater had a short life. Only 4 years later, in 1836, it was reconstructed again and reopened with a brand new name. The National Theater, a name which it kept until it burnt down in 1863. But it looks like in the Fallout universe, Mr. Pelby never renamed his theater after the reconstruction in 1836, and it never burned down in 1863. And so we find it hiding in the streets of Boston in the year 2287. Heading inside, we arrive in a rather modest lobby. To the left, we see a small area that would have been a line going past a Nuka-Cola machine to a refreshment counter. Here, the theater patrons could have purchased bakery items, candy, and beverages. There is still some pre-war money in the cash register. We see a sandwich board telling us that they served fresh coffee, and going behind the counter, we see a box of cigars and some day tripper. One more place to find the very rare chem. The final thing of note behind the counter is one first aid kit. There's not much else here. Heading out from behind the counter and turning east, we find a short hallway leading to an elevator. Stepping inside, we can open the hatch. There's nothing on top of the elevator car, but we do see a tall elevator shaft fading off into the darkness. The elevator brings us to the 4th floor. Here we find the theater stage, and we see that it wasn't a movie theater. No, they did live plays here. And on the stage are a bunch of mannequins, a couple dressed up like Revolutionary soldiers, most of which are naked. But as we step closer...
Attacking human.
What was a synth doing here? Did the Institute send him here? Or has he gone haywire? Perhaps this was a kidnapped synth, but the Rainers abandoned him here. Exploring the stage, we see that it's very unique. There's a lighthouse picture in some sort of half-moon alcove against the wall. We see some clothing racks covered in hats and pre-war clothing. Against the northern room is where the actors would have freshened up a bit. We find a box of bobby pins and other sundry goods, and an advance locked safe with some bowling pins on top of it. In the auditorium, we still see a few patrons. There's a uniformed skeleton in the front seat, and a Jangles the Moon Monkey. And on the other side, we find a teddy bear sitting right up front and a slumped over skeleton with the cooler beneath his feet. And that's it for Warren Theater. We find Warren Theater in downtown Boston, directly between the Combat Zone and Wilson Automatoys. It's southwest of the Combat Zone and northeast of Wilson Automatoys corporate HQ. This is part 3 of my tour of unmarked locations in Fallout 4. Bethesda excels at environmental storytelling. If we stop to smell the roses, we can often interpret a story based on how skeletons are arranged or on the things we find that have been left behind. In this video, we're going to explore a handful of such places, but if you want to catch up, you can watch episode 1 by clicking here. We find the next one while following a road north towards Recon Bunker Theta. Before we reach the bunker, if we look off to the right, we see a strange sight towering in the distance. Are those cars hanging from a tree? Climbing the hillside for a closer look, we see a campfire pouring smoke. But before we can explore it, we get jumped by a red scorpion. And then another.
Starting to have fun.
Well, we can easily see what chased off the people who were camping here. Sure enough, as we get closer, we see 2 cars at the top of this tree. There is a third at the base of one of the trees, but it hasn't been lifted up. Someone has made a campsite here. We find 2 sleeping bags next to a campfire and a mobile cooking station, and 1 duffel bag filled with minor loot. There's also some brain fungus surrounding the scene, but how do we explain these cars? Well, what likely happened is that these 3 cars were parked on this hillside. The bombs dropped, ending civilization, but these trees began to grow under them, and for the next 200 years, the trees continued to reach for the sky, pushing the cars above them up into the air. I'm honestly surprised we don't see more of this. You'd think it'd be a common occurrence. You can find the car tree on top of a hillside to the southeast of Recon Bunker Theta. We find the next unmarked location while taking the road south towards Somerville Place. If we look off to the right, we see some sort of statue off in the distance, but it has a strange pose for being a pre-war statue. As we get closer...
Opening fire!
Up, we found the artist. Looks like a raider here was unleashing his inner Van Gogh by splattering paint all over the structure. We see paint cans on the ground, and we see that this guy was performing amateur surgery on the statue. We find a couple of hammers and a blowtorch. There is white paint splattered all over, or is that bird crap? Maybe it's both. And in the statue's left hand, we find a chem box. There's a bench nearby, and on the bench, we find another rare day tripper. The raider had a small campsite. We find his sleeping bag beneath a blue tarp and a suitcase filled with raider armor. Taking a look at this statue, we can see exactly how extreme this raider was redecorating him. He shattered the head into 2 pieces, replaced the statue's right hand with part of the head, and placed that hand as growing out of the other part of the head. The limbs at one time had been detached, and it looks like he welded them back in place. This raider art piece lies along the road just northeast of Somerville Place. The next unmarked location is close by. If we head northeast from this site, we see a couple of ruined cars right next to a shack. After looting some Nuka-Cola hovering in the sky, we begin to hear some buzzing.
Let's get it! That's how we do things around here.
It was a stingwing, and his brothers attack us from a nearby cabin.
Oh, big mistake! That's what I call a confirmed kill.
Looks like this tiny shack was some sort of public restroom. We are on the men's restroom side. Heading inside, we find it a complete ruin. Going around to the other side, we see the door is closed, and inside both stalls are closed. In one, we find the skeleton of a woman lying on the ground next to a ruined toilet filled with pre-war money. This woman died while flushing bills down the toilet. What was her motive? Why was she flushing so much money? We don't find any answers in the next stall, though we do see her head peeking out. Looking northwest, we see a cabin on a nearby hillside, but we see that the cabin is seriously tilting. Heading up the steps to the porch, we see another one of those lovely "Do Not Feed the Bears" signs. This one has been mauled by a bear, ironically. And heading inside, we see a skeleton pinned beneath some lockers. There's an end of dungeon steamer trunk to the east against the wall. We can loot more brain fungus on the wall. And inside a box, we find quite a selection of flares. Turning towards the corpse, we understand exactly what happened. This man, who may have been a park ranger, was sleeping on his mattress when the bombs dropped. The tremors that resulted from the detonation caused these lockers that he was sleeping next to fall over, whereupon they squashed him between the mattress. We see a government property sign against the wall, giving us more evidence that this must have indeed been a park ranger. And by his desk, we find a wheelchair. Perhaps he was a war veteran, injured or even maimed during America's conflict with China, and after being discharged from the military, he made a career for himself as a park ranger. And this can help us explain why we still find him here. he looks pinned underneath these lockers. It doesn't look like he was squashed to death. His arms are outstretched, almost as if he was trying to crawl away. It may have been that he had no function of his lower extremities, and so he wasn't able to push himself away with his legs. As a man who could only use his upper body strength, he may have had a much longer and much more horrible death. We find this ranger cabin south-southwest of Cutler Bend. We find the next location while traveling the road south of ArcJet Systems. Eventually we pass a small brick shop to the right, but it's unique in that it has a huge Shalit propane fuel billboard erected on its roof. This must have been a propane stand for the Shalit company, and incidentally the only physical location this company has in Boston that I was able to find. We find their billboards all over the place, and even their trucks. Here's an example of one of their propane trucks on the road to Natick Banks. This one is interesting because this one was stopped because the overpass above it began to crumble. We see a huge chunk of concrete missing from the overpass and scattered all over this truck. Ironically, the overpass itself has a big Shalit billboard. So the Shalit propane truck was stopped by an overpass advertising Shalit. But back at the storefront, we see that since the war, someone has tried to turn this into a camp. There is the remains of a campfire and a cooking station outside. Inside, we find a Nuka-Cola machine with Nuka-Cola inside and a sleeping bag, so someone was here, but where did he go? The register still has some pre-war money inside. Heading outside and turning left, we see a huge propane tank. This is where they stored the propane before selling it. But then, uh-oh, we hear a voice. We get attacked by a raider and her dog. So there she is. She was the one camping out in the Shalit propane shop. But what was she doing up this hill? That's pretty far away from her camp. We can find a way behind the counter by hopping through a hole in the brick, knocked out by a fallen tree. Here we find a pipe revolver, some pre-war money, and an expert locked floor safe with quite a stash of ammunition and pre-war money. But now I wanted to figure out exactly what this raider was doing. Heading out of the shop and running up the hillside, we find a bunch of rocks at the top overlooking the propane shack. It's a little tricky, but if we do a running jump, we can get on top of it. And if we do, we are rewarded with a cap stash dangling off the ledge. The raider likely saw this stash and was trying to find a way on top when we approached. The Shalit propane shack lies along the road southeast of the Federal Ration stockpile and southwest of ArcJet Systems. The next unmarked location is not far away from here. If we head off the road and travel north of this spot, we see a strange sight: the front ends of cars sticking out of the ground. Is this some sort of art piece? And then we find the artist, a giant super mutant behemoth.
You know, ammo isn't cheap. Can we just pay you to play dead?
I should have snuck up and gotten a sneak critical with my knife. I forgot that this character isn't spec'd into rifles, so she's a horrible sniper. And he continues to assail us with these rocks. But thankfully, if we jump out of the way just in time, we don't get any damage.
Useful.
Whoo-wee. And we live to become crippled another day. Ouch. With the behemoth dead, we can move down the hill to explore his masterpiece. And sure enough, we see a bunch of cars arranged in a similar fashion to the Bluestones at Stonehenge. I suppose we can assume that the behemoth did this himself. He got bored and in his boredom picked up these giant cars and shoved them into the ground. we find Carhenge, almost due east of the Sunshine Tidings Co-op and nearly due south of Walden Pond. Next to this is an interesting site that probably has something to do with ArcJet Systems. I covered the ArcJet Systems building in a separate video that you can watch here. But if we look north up the hill from ArcJet, we find a little bit of a shack with some sort of red iron scaffolding nearby. But inside the shack, another stingwing. The shack has a beautiful pre-war tractor inside and the skeleton of a woman draped on top of it. Heading outside to explore this scaffolding, we find what appears to be some fusion reactors, one of which still has a fusion core. Uh-oh.
I should have a battery drive.
Doggone stingwings. This red scaffolding is providing some sort of architectural support for a bunch of wires that traverse between pylons connecting these two rounded tank-looking things. But I don't think they're tanks. I think they must be machines covered in some sort of rounded metal chassis. My bet is that they provided power for nearby ArcJet Systems, which, as we know from the quest, needed a whole lot of electricity to produce and launch its rockets. We even see a rocket launch bunker right outside ArcJet. We find the ArcJet power supply just north of ArcJet Systems. We find the next sad sight by traveling through the hills northwest of Fairline Hills Estates. We arrive at a picnic site just on the outskirts of the city of Boston, providing one of the best views of downtown Boston in the game. The beauty of this site was not lost upon its pre-war residents. We find a park bench here with the skeleton of a man still clutching his ProSnap camera. Here we find a bunch of picnic tables and benches covered in pre-war skeletons. And to me, this presents a troubling dilemma. We know that the bombs hit ground here in Boston on Saturday morning at 9:47. But here we find a little park where people, possibly a family, were having some sort of picnic. Men, women, surrounded by plates, cutlery, and glasses, and even a chef standing next to a barbecue grill, still wearing his chef hat. Isn't 9:47 in the morning a little early to be having a barbecue? Was it not uncommon in the 1950s and 60s for families to come to gardens and parks and have big barbecues early in the morning? I expressed similar thoughts when we discovered all of the skeletons dining on outdoor picnic benches just outside Jamaica Plain. You can watch my video on Jamaica Plain by clicking here. At any rate, this picnic area, with arguably one of the best views of Boston, is on a hillside overlooking the train tracks just southwest of the Boston Police rationing site. We find the next location by walking south of Somerville Place. If we're exploring at night, we see light glowing off in the distance. This is unique as it is the only light that we see. It appears to be a string of bulbs between two trees. As we creep closer, we discover a shack hanging from some trees, and just outside is a feral ghoul. If we remain stealthy, we can get closer without disturbing a fight going on between another feral ghoul and a Mirelurk hunter. When the fight is over, we can destroy the winner. But then another Mirelurk hunter emerges from the reeds. With the hunters done, we can finally explore this shack. We see not one but 3 strings of bulbs forming a triangle between the trees. We see a dead campfire on the ground right next to a Vault-Tec van, and in the back of the van, 3 jars of Buffout and a jar of Radex. There is also a microscope and test tubes back here, as well as a dirty mattress. Was someone sleeping in this van while whipping up his own batch of chems? We can explore the treehouse by climbing a ramp and then some stairs to the bottom floor. Here we find another mattress down here with a couple of ruined dressers. There's a pipe pistol hanging from a nearby pegboard and a cooking station down here. We can continue by climbing a staircase to the roof. And here we find the corpse of a Minuteman. What is a Minuteman doing all the way out here? The best explanation I can come up with is that this Minuteman must have been a survivor of the Quincy Massacre. Quincy, after all, is not that far away. If he is a survivor, then during the battle he must have slinked away. Preston took Mama Murphy, Sturgis, and the Longs on a trip to the northwest, while this guy followed the road out of Quincy to the southwest. He stumbled upon this shack and decided to make it his home despite the danger. He put a chair on the rooftop and sat here picking off mirelurks. We find his short laser musket on a table and a basket filled with fusion cells beneath it. Sadly, it looks like one of these hunters, which can attack from a great distance, covered him in poison, and here he died. We find the Minuteman treehouse by traveling almost due east of Somerville Place. It's deep in the marshes, but it's a great little place to hit early in the game if we want to get a complete Minuteman getup. We can walk away with a uniform, hat, laser musket, everything. We find the next one while traveling southwest of the Suffolk County Charter School. As we wade through the marshes, we see a strange sight. It looks like 5 tiny bunkers arrayed in a circle with one in the middle. We see antennas and exhaust vents sticking out of all of them, wires connecting them, and pipes burrowing deep into the ground. But the one in the middle has a door. Opening it up, "You look nice today." Ah. This was a siege breaker sentry bot. Thankfully, with Robotics Expert, we can turn this into an easy battle by hacking him and initializing self-destruct. Oh yeah, I forgot that they do attack after you do that. Running away. It just so happened that after the sentry bot exploded, I found Duke from the Atom Cats duking it out with a Mr. Gutsy. But he had it resolved before I could intervene. Goodness, I don't know how Duke is alive after all of that. The Mr. Gutsy was guarding a downed vertibird. Thankfully, Duke killed him for us, but after we beat the game, this becomes one of the many military checkpoints or pieces of technology that the faction we chose to side with will guard and protect. Here we will sometimes have to come and defend the checkpoint. By the vertibird, we find an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk and a power armor frame with some randomly generated pieces of power armor. Depending on our level, we can even find XO1 pieces. Anyway, heading back to these strange concrete structures, we can loot a bunch of fusion cores off of the Siege Breaker sentry bot and examine the scene more closely. And I walk away confused as to what's going on. Each of these little concrete structures is sinking into the marshes, but the wiring between them all still appears to be functional, and I can't explain this door leading to a brick wall. Someone, possibly a raider, painted the words, "You look nice today," but why was a sentry bot guarding it? I took a look at the local map and we don't find any hatches or doors leading to some sort of subterranean structure, and the closest point to this structure is a school, the Suffolk County Charter School. We find it to the southwest of the school, so I walk away unable to explain this strange sight. We find the next one while exploring the marshes southeast of the Wilson Automatoys factory. While fleeing from super mutants, we see some sort of concrete structure blocking off some water. As we creep closer, we see it has some sort of concrete lip. There are a bunch of spare tires on the ground. It looks like some sort of concrete bridge that at one time had gone over a river, but now it's covered in dirt and plants. As we explore the top of this thing, we find the roof and out of it pours some smoke. This hole in the roof has been covered by scrap wood and metal. We can peer inside, but we don't see much though. What is that? The green glow of a glowing one? But glowing ones don't build campfires. Where is the smoke coming from? Well, if we crawl down from its roof to the south, we can turn around where we see the back wall to what appears to be some sort of makeshift shack. But to find the door, we have to navigate back to the river. Here we see a gap in the plywood leading into this concrete structure, and almost immediately we find ghouls. This ghoul was lying on a mattress right next to a dismembered settler. The settler's corpse is still fresh. He was killed recently. We can loot a nearby suitcase and a dresser. And as we continue to explore this shack, we have to keep our eyes out for more ferals. There is another dead settler sitting on a couch nearby. These settlers had tried to turn this into a home. We see camp posters on the walls, dressers and other furniture filled with scrap, even a dining room table nearby. They laid down some boards to cover the mud. If we follow the boards, we bypass some storage and their cooking station, loot some meat in a few containers to reach the final room. And sure enough, it was a glowing one. Sheesh. I didn't expect him to be that tough. I would have taken greater care. Heading inside, we find the decapitated and dismembered corpse of the final settler. Somehow the ghouls found their way here, possibly attracted to the radiation in the nearby water, and when they did, they found the perfect shelter already built for them. The problem was that it was already inhabited, but that didn't become a problem for long. After looting a wooden crate where we find some chems, we see a cap stash and a pipe pistol on top of an expert-locked safe. Inside, we find a bunch of explosives and money. And that's it for the little sunken swamp shack. Part of me wants to turn it into a little player home. I like it so well. However, I worry about these ferals respawning and the containers not being safe for storage. The swamp shack is a ways southeast of the Wilson Automatoys factory. We find the next one while exploring the ruins near to Hubris Comics. If we look north, we see an alleyway being protected by a machine gun turret.
Time to earn our paychecks.
And we see that we've awakened a hornet's nest. The turret was guarding a bit of a square, inhabited by a bunch of raiders. Even after killing these raiders, we still see red marks on our compass. We find ourselves in some sort of kitchen. There's a bathroom in the back, but nothing here, and a door to the left leading deeper inside. But before we go, we'll finish exploring this kitchen area. After looting the corpses, we can head outside. Here we find a little shack with a chemistry station inside. Looks like these were industrious raiders. And then turning north, we see a path leading to a chained door. Stepping outside, we'll learn the name of this place by reading a nearby illuminated sign. However, the illumination is partially broken. We see it flickering, but it still makes the sign hard to read. So taking a look at this during the day, we'll learn that this place is called Shenley's Oyster Bar, and the raiders have dutifully moved in. They've tossed a human corpse on top of it, and they hang two other corpses from chains beneath it. Well, looks like we have to do something about this. Heading back inside this little plaza area, we can turn a corner to find another door to the west, also chained.
Hey!
But then we get spotted by a raider. He's not out in the alley, where is he?
Come on now, rookie!
He's on the roof, and he's shooting at us. Racing back into the bar, we can open the door to the staircase leading to the top of Shenley's Oyster Bar. We arrive inside the bar's primary kitchen. Lots of ruined ovens and refrigerators. Moving to the east, we find a door to the right. This leads to some sort of storage room. We don't find much, just some Abraxo cleaner. Oh, Deacon found a raider. The raider must have been walking up and down this nearby staircase to the north. After looting some glowing fungus, we can close the door, but there's nothing beneath the stairs. Heading upstairs, we loot more brain fungus on floor 2, and then arriving on floor 3, we find an interesting sight, a human skeleton slumped over in the corner. But between his legs is a hacksaw, and if we look carefully, we see that his right arm is still handcuffed to a dismembered right arm. Did he hack off one of his own limbs to be free? But no, we see that he still has his left hand. In the handcuffs is someone else's arm, and it's disconnected at the shoulder. So they didn't just hack off a hand, they wrenched off an entire arm at the shoulder. But this guy is lying here dead. So either the other man killed this one and then used the hacksaw to hack off his own arm, but why he started at the shoulder and not the wrist I'll never understand. Or maybe this guy died in some sort of firefight between, say, kidnappers and the police, but then the bombs dropped, leaving the man to fend for himself, and so he hacked off his own arm to free himself. At any rate, we leave by turning around and going through the western exit. We arrive on the rooftop to Shelly's bar. There's no one on the roof in front of us, but if we round a corner, we see a shack, and sure enough inside... Oh, let's try that again. There we go. That would have been a perfect opportunity for Mr. Sandman, but sadly this character doesn't have it yet. She will eventually. She's still too low level. We can loot a wooden crate in here and head out to the rooftop. The raiders have a nice table and chairs out here for lounging around, and to the north we find an ammo canister underneath a table with a pipe pistol. But you know, I could have sworn I heard a male voice while I was running around down there. We see some stairs leading up to another level. We find an end-of-dungeon steamer trunk up here, and a little throne where raiders would drink some of Bobrov's best and use a pistol to pick off wanderers. But no male raider. Maybe I imagined it. Instead of opening the door and spending all of that time zoning, we can peer over the ledge and leap on top of the nearby shack. This way we don't take any falling damage. But as we turn around to go back the way we came...
Really? So close. Dead bastard.
There he was, hiding in the alley. And with that, we fully explore Shenley's Oyster Bar. We find it along a road near to the river, south of Hallucinogen and north of Hubris Comics. To find our final unmarked location, we head to Bunker Hill. If we follow the road out of Bunker Hill south, and then before taking the bridge, immediately turn east, we walk a ways until we find a little bit of a maritime sculpture, an anchor and some rope in the middle of a town square, and some sort of plaque that we can't read today. There is a sea captain's hat on top of this, and just to the east of this sculpture is an abandoned pre-war dry cleaner. There's a mailbox outside and a door leading to Charlestown Laundry. Inside we find exactly what we would expect, a little bit of a laundry/dry cleaner, and in a basket on one of the washing machines we find a copy
There we go.
of Le Coiffe. You've collected an issue of Le Coiffe. Permanently unlock a new unique hairstyle. We have unlocked the Hornet's Nest. See what the buzz is all about. You know, in all my time playing Fallout 4 and watching other people play Fallout 4, I really haven't seen very many people using this Hornet's Nest hairstyle. I wonder why. Surely it couldn't be that bad. Now that it's unlocked, we can head to a salon. Oh, that's horrible. Oh, it's absolutely awful. Oh, my eyes. Oh, God, the humanity. Well, now we know why Bethesda hid the Beehive in an unmarked pre-war laundry. We can loot each of these washers and dryers for random junk and scrap. There's a broken door to the north. We see a couch beyond there, but really nothing else. There's a shelf to the west covered in a Braxo cleaner, great for crafting. And next to this, a novice-locked door.
Nice.
Oh, but as we open the door, we push a skeleton aside, and the skeleton was reaching for the door. When we arrived, we saw that the door was locked. Presumably that means that this poor man was locked inside. There's a Nuka-Cola Quantum on his desk, a whole box filled with soap, again great for crafting, more Abraxo cleaner, man we can walk away with a lot of Abraxo cleaner, and an expert locked floor safe in the northwestern corner with ammunition inside. And here we find what must have likely killed this guy, 2 barrels of toxic waste. What are toxic waste barrels doing in a laundromat? Why were they right next to this manager's desk? He must have died pretty quickly succumbing to the radiation, but this doesn't explain how they got here to begin with. Did he show up for work one day only to discover that, say, the government decided to store 2 barrels of toxic waste in his office? But then as he entered, the door closed behind him. He whipped around to open it, only to find it locked. He then spent the next day or 2 scratching at the door, trying to get out before he died to radiation poisoning. But why would they store nuclear waste here? Just doesn't make any sense. And with that, we are out of time. There are plenty of more wonderful unmarked locations in Fallout 4. This is only episode 3, so we have many more to explore. What are some of your favorite unmarked locations that you'd like me to cover in upcoming videos? Let me know in the comments section below. I publish many videos each and every week here on my channel, and if you want to make sure you don't miss my next video, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I have a brand new shirt in the shop. Who's a good boy? It's everyone's favorite German Shepherd, smiling big and being rambunctious, on a shirt, available in a variety of both men's and women's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. You can also find this design on other products as well, smartphone cases, mugs, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon this week with a brand new video.
Shang, what have I told you about keeping the lake clear? Don't make me shut down this little stand of yours.
Hey there.
It's a
Here's
health
my
hazard,
water.
Shang.
You wanna find-
Let's see what you got.